Marty, Canada's not for sale.
It's not.
Apparently, but our politicians are. And that's the most interesting part about this whole meeting that took place earlier today.
But what a weird hat, though. I mean, like, yeah, you're talking about Doug Ford's hat, right? Like, Canada's
right.
not for sale. Like, I sort of get the reference, but nobody's trying to buy us right now. I mean, Trump's going to take us by force. So if Trump takes us by force, what should the hat be? You know, like, yeah.
We're not going along with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But is this the best we got? And that's really what it comes down to. I guess the first topic, of course, for today would be that meeting, the meeting that took place in Ottawa. And it was the meeting of premiers, right? And the meeting of premiers, they brought all the premiers together to discuss, because actually, it's funny. The criticism was that the premiers were trying to negotiate with the United States about these tariffs, these incoming tariffs, because there was nothing happening at the federal
nobody's
level.
Negotiating at this point. I mean, there's no negotiation. Well, there's a little bit of negotiation, I guess. Like Danielle Smith went down there. I don't know what she said to Trump, but everything's kind of speculation at this point, right? Trump said they're going under the assumption that tariffs are real, but they're not negotiating. They're what the premiers did with Trudeau and Melanie Joly is they're sitting in a room formulating a battle plan in advance, right? We're not negotiating. They're just sitting down formulating a weird battle plan. But and the meetings, and it's normal for them to get together, but this is an emergency meeting. I mean, it's an emergency meeting, and it was a bit dysfunctional.
So the image that I got, right, was over the past week, there's been tons of pundits on Twitter, like, and I'm talking like pundits from the CBC, like Andrew Coyne, these types, saying it's irresponsible that the provincial leaders are going and trying to speak with Donald Trump unilaterally. Whether it's Danielle Smith or it's Francois Legault trying to, pipe up and say, hey, you know what? Perhaps we can work something out. We don't want tariffs on our industries, and this would be really bad for us. So perhaps we could do something. Now, the problem is it's their responsibility to take care of their constituents if the federal government drops the ball. And that's really what's happened.
Bingo, exactly.
And they've jumped in.
I was going to say, you're absolutely right. Like under a properly functioning Canadian Confederation, sure, if everything's running smooth and we have competent people, then you let Ottawa have that first crack at Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, Trudeau's a lame duck. So, and then who are we going to send? Like, do you really want to send Melanie Joly and Francois Philippe Champagne to negotiate on our behalf? No. So, and that's one of the things that's rubbing that was right out of the gate. That was one of the things that was rubbing everybody, Trudeau in particular, that's a couple of premiers, Danielle Smith in particular, took some initiatives. And Danielle Smith went down to Mar-a-Lago this weekend, and she brought Jordan Peterson and Kevin O'Leary because it facilitates intros and
which is hilarious in the
it is hilarious, but that's how it works, right? I mean, like if I wanted to go meet you, and I know that you're friends with so-and-so and we have a mutual acquaintance, or I know that you like so-and-so, sure. I'm going to bring Jordan Peterson because, I mean, I bet you Trump liked Jordan Peterson more than he liked Danielle Smith. Right?
well, maybe. I mean,
maybe.
She's a business person and she's in control of virtually the energy sector of Canada. I mean,
totally.
Alberta is the energy sector of Canada.
It's the oil sector. I mean, the engineer in me thinks energy.
Okay.
There are two provinces that have a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. BC has a lot of energy. It's electricity, which I don't know. I'm not familiar if BC sells a lot to the U.S., but I know Quebec makes a lot of electricity and sells to like New York, New Hampshire, and places like that. So, that's electricity. That's energy. But yes,
we do actually sell a lot to the U.S. and it's baked into our prices to make it lucrative to not use energy, so that we'll send it to the United States so we can sell it at a profit, even though it's
But so Danielle
tax-driven
went
example.
down. Danielle went down, and she didn't tell us much. Like, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say she probably did a good sales pitch and kind of convinced Trump to maybe not put a big tariff on Alberta oil, because the Americans need 4 million barrels of oil from us every day.
Yes.
So, it's a pretty reasonable sales pitch to the US to go, listen, this is something where, I mean, to me, tariffs are when you want to put tariffs on something when I'm buying something from you and I have choices from other people, and I want to, but for the US, why would you put a tariff on something that you have no choice? So, and I think that was the rub, like, because when she went to Toronto or Ottawa for the meeting with the other premiers, they know that sort of Alberta's okay, done its thing, it's protected, and now the other, let's not say all the others, the other province that, Alberta exports a lot, BC does too, and Ontario, the others don't, right? So who's worried right now? It's Doug Ford. That's, Doug Ford's the guy who's got a lot to lose, and he's worried that now Alberta won't be affected by tariffs and Ontario will, and so now he's getting. He's desperate. He got really desperate today. I mean, he basically pleaded with Alberta. It's like, come on, Alberta, you got to be team players. Like, you gotta, you gotta be team players. And as an Albertan, I'm like, buddy, we've been team players for a long time, and we're kind of defending ourselves. And
well, who are the biggest recipients of the transfer payments from Alberta? Ontario, Quebec,
the Maritimes. So. Yeah. Yeah, and then where it got really, really ridiculous today is
well, before you move on from Doug
sure.
Ford, I wanna play one clip that made me laugh of Doug Ford, and this was during that conference, and he had this to say. It really cracked me up.
Isn't this great that we have 3 political parties sitting down and we have a robust conversation? We may agree or disagree, but we're coming out united. I can tell you, spending a lot of time in the US, you would never see a group of Democrats and Republicans sitting here collaboratively. I promise you one thing, around President Trump's office, a whole bunch of Democrats and Republicans saying, how can we attack Canada? It's not happening.
Oh, is it not happening? I don't know. I was just thinking about perhaps the Democrats and Republicans that came together to put together Donald Trump's administration, and like the whole reason why it was a landslide victory.
Yeah, actually, Elon was a true Democrat at one point. I know for sure.
Absolutely.
RFK was.
Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat from Hawaii
nominee, right?
She was a representative. She was a congresswoman.
Yeah. Totally. So yeah,
that's the culmination of Democrats and Republicans. So for Dougie Boy to come forward and make these wild claims like Canada's become united, this is the most humorous part about it for me. We're suddenly united. The only thing that's been united across party lines is Doug Ford with the Liberals for as long as I can remember. This is actually why I advocate for mandatory primaries. We should have mandatory primaries. So if you always vote conservative, you can at least get the crappy conservative leader out, so you can get a good conservative leader in his place instead of always having the incumbent running every time.
Yeah. And Dougie did one better today. Or maybe it was Dougie or maybe it was Trudeau, but they're using the term Team Canada. Like they've used that for a couple of weeks now. Like Alberta, if you don't join, you're not on Team Canada. I'm like, oh God, like suddenly you want us on the team, right? Like I don't know how they can't see the hypocrisy. Actually, for the politicians, I don't give a shit, because they're never honest. They say whatever they have to say in the moment, but it's when citizens and other people get on that bandwagon. Like, I can't tell you how many people got mad at me today because I'm a strong Albertan. My opinion on this is, if we manage to have no tariffs, then fine by us. And Dougie, you're on your own. Solve your problem. It's not up to me. They went as far as suggesting that Alberta should cut its oil production and squeeze the Americans in support of Ontario. And then Trudeau went one step further and says, if Alberta doesn't do that, he's going to impose export tariffs on us. So I'm like, wow. So I got Trump who wants to impose tariffs, but I succeed in walking him off that cliff. So then my own guy turns around and says, well, I'm going to hit you with an export tariff. I like, I felt like it feels like that poor Russian soldier in Enemy at the Gate. On one end you're charging the Germans with their machine gun, and then if you dare turn around, here's your Russian officer shooting you for poor Alberta right now. We're in a rock and a hard place. So
you know what? This is crazy because it sounds like the federal government, the Trudeau and the Liberals and all these team players are the biggest advocates for Western separation at the moment. Because that, if anything, would entice Alberta to join in and annex themselves into the United States, this might be it.
This might be it. And by the end of this show, we're going to see how crazy it is when we when we also segue into the leadership campaign because of the Liberals. It's insane. So yeah, so that's where we're at, man. And
well, I wanted to share a little bit more on this one. So there's the this.
Yeah, well, we got to talk about cars, right? Like Ontario got in trouble with cars today. I mean, and let's face it, Ontario is automotive parts and cars. And insurance. What else is Ontario known for?
Well, I was going to get one more point on this trade thing, because this one came up, and it was this other premier saying, we're going to impose tariffs back on the United States as if this is the right plan forward. Gov.exe saying premiers are preparing for economic warfare against the U.S. using our oil and gas sector as leverage. Now, this is crazy. I wrote this on Twitter because I thought this was really important. This government is dangerous and needs to be reined in. It's actually anti-democratic for them right now to step up and start a trade war when 2/3 of the country are clearly ready to vote them out. It's in the polls. It's undeniable. But they're stalling so that they can have this moment in the sun with Donald Trump when it doesn't need to be. It's time for an election. It really is time for an election. We should be going to the polls. Who cares who's the leader of the Liberals there's
different names for it, right? Yeah. I mean, there's different names for it. Some people call it a scorched earth policy, right? That the Liberals on their way out are like literally, you're about to be defeated. Again, a Russian analogy. The real scorched earth strategy was the Russians. As the Russians were retreating when the Germans were attacking them, they were destroying everything of their own stuff in their path so that the Germans couldn't use it. So the Liberals, in a sense, like Trudeau, they look like they're doing that. Like make the relationship with Canada, with the US so bad that poor Poilievre is just going to be like, they're setting him up for failure, which is,
well, it won't be failure because I think Pierre Poilievre has a more balanced approach to dealing with Donald Trump and his trade negotiations. I think it makes a lot of sense, and even Stephen Harper came forward and reiterated a lot of the same. I've got a clip here somewhere of Stephen Harper actually talking specifically about this. Let me pull this up. Share this tab instead.
He was on a podcast. And by the way, before you play the clip, he was on a podcast like minuscule compared to yours, Clyde. So if Harper's willing to go on, like, you got to invite Harper, man. Like, you
should come in and talk with us.
Yeah, Harper should come and talk to you, and so should Poilievre. Anyways, play the clip. It's a good clip. Yeah.
Well, this is a good clip because it makes a lot of sense to the situation.
Trump may want some changes in trade arrangements, but I must admit to being shocked by some of the things he said. They're just not so. First of all, we don't actually sell dairy into the United States, or sell almost none. So that's not true. Canada, it is true that Canada presently has a modest trade surplus with the United States. The reason, Gabe, we do is because you buy so much of our oil and gas. In fact, you buy it at a discount to world markets. It's actually Canada that subsidizes the United States in this regard. And so maybe my response is maybe Canadians, if Mr. Trump feels this way, should be looking at selling their oil and gas to other people. We certainly have always wanted to do some of that. Maybe now's the time to do it. And when we talk about subsidizing Canadian defense, I don't know what he's talking about. We have a shared defense of North America. The United States does that because it's in the vital interest of the United States. You want Canada to be a neutral country?
Not likely.
I kind of don't understand. I just don't understand that. I don't understand that argument. There's many things he's saying. Even when you talk about migrants, first of all, there's no major migrant flow from Canada to the United States. You've obviously got an enormous problem on the southern border. By the way, I'm completely sympathetic with Donald Trump's position on this. I thought the policy of open borders of the Biden administration was disgraceful. I mean, I think it was a violation of President. I know Joe Biden personally. I like him, but it was a violation of his fundamental duties to the country.
So there's a few points to hit on that. So we're subsidizing the U.S. With energy because it's a self-inflicted wound. That one, we're only selling to the United States because we're limiting how our oil and gas and energy sector can ship to the world markets. We're the ones stopping that.
Yeah, we basically only have a pipeline south. Like, people keep arguing with me, we have Trans Mountain and pipe. No, folks. Like, we're sending 4 million barrels south, basically.
That's where it's going, and we could ship it. We could put it on the open market, and then our prices would go up relative. With the United States, they'd be willing to pay a little more if
they go up $10
to another place.
The Western Canada Select oil price is always $10 to $15 cheaper than the West Texas Intermediate price in US dollars. And people say to me, how can that be? And I always explain it this way. Like, you and I each have 5 cows. So there's 10 cows, and there's a guy who wants to buy 7, but you don't have a truck and I have a truck. So I can sell him 5 cows for $1,000 each. And you have to plead, you have to sell me your cows because you need my truck. So how much do I buy your cows for? Something less than $1,000. I buy your cows for $800, and then I resell them to that other guy for $900 or whatever. Like, and so that's the same thing with the pipeline. The pipeline's a truck. The Canadian pipeline, and I think you have a map ready to show, but the pipelines going down are bottlenecked. We could say we make more oil than what the pipelines can take. And the one in particular that's most important in this page is that green one. That green one is Keystone. Okay, so that's actually the Keystone pipeline is the one that's in green there, and so
perhaps this is an even better map actually to view this one. So if you look at this one, you can actually see the pipelines that exist and the ones that were proposed. So like this whole concept with Melanie Jolie threatening to shut off the oil from Alberta, that would cut off Ontario because we never made the Energy East pipeline which would have been all on Canadian soil. Instead, we've got to go in through all these states. It goes right through Michigan before it gets down to Ontario to Line 9 and supply Ontario and Quebec with energy. This is just it's absurd that they don't even know their own they don't even know the pipelines in their own country.
Eastern Canada gets a bit of
they keep shutting them down. It's crazy.
Yeah, Eastern Canada gets a little bit of oil from Alberta via the US. It's insane. And but yeah, so what I was saying is Canadian Alberta producers undercut each other every month. Like the way it works, like if Keystone is owned by TransCanada. I'll give you a quick summary. And every month, Keystone accepts what are called nominations because they're regulated by the federal government. They got to give everybody an equal chance to go down that pipeline. So every month on the first Monday of the month, anybody who's got oil that want to ship to the US, they bid on it. And there's a little fight. And that's where they try and undersell each other. And then, if you try to sell your barrel for $50, I'm going to have no choice. I go, you know what? I'll go 49. And so you and I chew each other up until TransCanada says we're full. And then we wait for the next bid round the next month. So the Americans get their oil $10, $15 cheaper. If we built a huge pipeline going west, like Trans Mountain, like if we quadrupled the size of that, we could sell 4 million barrels to China and not one to the US, and the Americans would be screwed. And then they'd have to buy all that 4 million from somebody else.
Now,
Trump,
incidentally, because it's the environmentalists that largely shut down these pipelines, and they're also the ones that advocate that if anything is owned, it should be owned by the government. That the private entities are bad at managing things and they cause environmental damage. Now, if you take what you just told us, essentially you're saying that there's a bunch of different parties involved here. There's someone who owns the pipeline, there's the people who own the oil, and they put their oil in the pipeline. Well, the guys who run the pipeline are responsible for that oil. If they spill the oil, they just bought a bunch of oil and dumped it on the ground. They don't want to do that. That's not how you run a business.
The pipeline in the scenario described is literally a truck. You transfer it to the pipeline via bill of lading, and the pipeline owner, TransCanada, is responsible for that oil. In fact, the oil already belongs to the guy at the other end who's going to take delivery of it. Actually, you want to know something really fascinating? Because I operated Keystone. So I operated the Keystone pipeline. I was director of operations for Keystone, and I was the guy.
But I was just going to make the quick point that if the government ran it, and it wouldn't matter. If they had a spill, it's just an externality. It's just whatever. The government just, who cares? We got all the money in the world. We don't take any responsibility. Exactly, right? No. So it's better off in private hands because then there's more responsibility. There's actually accountability. If anything goes wrong, you're getting sued. You're in charge of cleanup. You're in charge of all these things. So I just wanted to throw that out there just in case people are against pipelines. It's a good argument for them.
But let me tell you a quick story. So a pipeline, when a barrel of oil goes into the pipeline at Hardisty, it takes about 27 days before it gets to Texas at the other end, right? And so the Texas refinery buys the pipeline, the oil barrel like 2 months in advance, kind of thing, and they're planning it. And let's say all of a sudden, while the barrel is in transit, the refinery has a power failure and something goes wrong. They can't accept the barrel. Barrels get traded while they're in the pipeline 5-6 times. It's crazy. Like they get bought and sold. And then you get a guy who's like, hey, I just bought 100,000 barrels at whatever, $40. But the guy at the other end can't take him. They got their Rolodexes and their speed dials and they're calling another guy. And the other guy goes, I'll give you $37.90 for it or whatever. And guys make money just trading other people's barrels while they're in transit. It's wild.
That's insane. Yeah, but this just lends to how amazing the marketplace actually is. And when you just have a central authority, they can never manage this. You're talking about thousands of people every day doing little microtransactions all over the place, and that's how a market works.
And that's why when I hear people say, "Oh, the price of oil is fixed or controlled or this or that," no, it's not, folks. No, it's not. It'd be like you trying to set the price of 2x4. It's too big of a market. Too big of a market. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. But
let's talk about cars. Let's not get off this topic too quick. Let's talk about cars, right? So Ontario, the other big news this week is that Ottawa ran out of money. I don't know how that's even possible. That's never happened to Ottawa. And that was their excuse. They eliminated subsidies for electric vehicles.
Yes, they did. They also a bunch of these businesses that we gave our money to went bust, are not going to be building the plants. We still paid billions and billions of dollars. It came out of the taxpayers' coffers. So we're not going to be getting all kinds of things that we would typically get with our tax dollars. We just gave them away to businesses that failed in the end. It all reminds me of like Solyndra. Do you remember that whole thing that happened in the United States? Obama bought a bunch of solar power plants, and then they all went bust within 6 months, like $4 billion, and they just went bust. It's like, again, back to our trading idea, anytime the government invests in something, short that company. They're about to go bust.
Yeah. So that's a great example. So the Canadian government said no more subsidies for electric vehicles. It's a $5,000 subsidy. Immediately, the manufacturers said, ooh, well, that's going to hit our sales because they know that people are buying their cars because they're subsidized. And then immediately the industry and other groups said, well, then, because as it stands, there's still an Ottawa mandated guideline that says at least 25% of cars sold by 2028, which is just around the corner, folks, have to be electric vehicles. and it's 100% by 2030.
That's right.
Or 2035.
2035.
The lobby groups immediately said, whoa, if you're not giving $5,000 subsidies, you got to reverse these.
Well, not only that, they're not even keeping up on their arrangement for building the infrastructure.
No,
so the infrastructure is not there. The auto manufacturers are like, hold on a second, people aren't going to buy these things if you don't build the infrastructure. People in Alberta last year,
they won't be, and nobody's going to build the infrastructure if it's not highly subsidized. Like there's no,
and people all through the middle of Canada learned last year real quick what it's like to have a Tesla, and I'm not picking on Tesla, but any of these electric vehicles, batteries don't function very well in the cold.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing. And so, so they came forward and they said, enough's enough. We got to kill this, because with a mandate like this, you're basically just making you're putting a cap on the sales of other vehicles, because people aren't going to be buying these other ones. 20% of the fleet has to be electric by this time, and then 100% by 2035. It's not tenable. It's just not even doable.
It's not achievable.
Is new data revealing that the pace of the charging infrastructure rollout is slowing. Both are critical preconditions to mass EV adoption. According to the federal government, the IZEV Consumer Purchase Program has exhausted its funding before the first year of mandated ZEV sales targets come into force in 2026. And the build out of charging ports slowed in 2024 by 3,000 public ports compared to 2023. This is at a time when the government's own analysis is calling for an unprecedented acceleration in the pace of the charging infrastructure build out. 100,000 public ports are required this year. There are 32,000 available today. At the same time, provincial governments in British Columbia and Quebec have established even more aggressive sales mandates, requiring 90% and 85% zero-emission vehicle sales by 2030, respectively. Both governments have recently pulled back on consumer purchase incentives and failed to build the necessary charging and electricity capacity. It should be obvious to everyone now that provincial and federally mandated zero-emission vehicle sales targets are no longer ambitious, but a complete fantasy.
Clyde,
there is no pathway.
It's a total fantasy.
They make me so mad when they say things like this. It should be obvious. Like I wish we had a way to go back to your episodes, right? Like all our episodes, and find little moments in them. Because you and I talked about this like 2 years ago, right? Like this is ridiculous. Like I wish people. What did he say? I wish people would realize. Look, dude, this is predictable. We know.
Yeah. We said it. We said it.
Yeah. I even find his numbers unrealistic. Like he says, we need
100,000 chargers.
I'd say we need more than that to meet their goals. But
well, just think about it. If 100% of the vehicles on the road by 2035 were electric vehicles, how many gas pumps do we have currently? And it only takes a few minutes to fill up at the gas pump. Exactly. We're talking hours at a charging station, and then not to mention all of the massive, like this is the problem when people who don't understand physics even or technology are in charge of technology.
The charging stations aren't there. The infrastructure's not there.
Supplying the energy, period, to the area. Like transmission lines are they're big enough for so much service.
But you can't even supply the cable. There's not even enough cable to do this. Like there's logistic problem on
and then on top of that, because of the the rising crime that we're having, crackheads are stealing copper all over the place. Totally. People are ripping those cables off of those things as they're building them. It's nuts.
And then they also forget things like they say, okay, we need to build 100,000, let's say, and it takes 10 years because you do 10,000 a year. But by the time you get to year 10, the ones you built 10 years ago, they're outdated, or they've been vandalized, or they've broken, or you put them in a wrong spot. And so you literally, these projects take so long that stuff becomes outdated by the time you progress. No, hey, you know who's quiet in all of this? When's the last time we heard Stephen Guilbeault say anything?
Nothing. He's silent on that. He's
Yeah.
absolutely silent. He was so excited to announce this stuff. He was gonna cut funding for roads. That guy.
Yeah.
That's how crazy
Well,
it was.
and Clyde, like, I don't know, I can't speak for BC, but I can speak for Alberta. People got mad because just this year, starting this year, like 3 weeks or 10 days ago, if you register an electric vehicle in Alberta, there's an extra $200 surcharge because our governments are addicted to spending. And so they realize that if somebody didn't fuel up at the gas pump, then somehow or other they're losing in on a little bit of revenue, right? You don't get the fuel tax. So they hit them at the registration time once a year with a $200. And so some guy says, like, there's literally a guy on the news who says, well, I bought this car to save money because you told me I'd save money. It's like, well, we only say that to get you to buy the car. But once you bought the car, we're going to,
once you've got it, then you've got it. Actually, there's a great clip. I showed this in my video this morning, but I'll show it again today because this is an Australian guy who's right on board with getting the electric vehicles and getting hooked up, only to realize that it didn't save him any money. It's like a luxury thing that's going to cost way more money, and at the end of the day, it doesn't even really save the environment at all. Here he is talking about it.
Here's the problem. I have a Nissan Leaf, and when it was delivered, it said 0 carbon. And I said to the salesman, well, no, it's going to be plugged into a coal power station. He looked at me shocked and he said, no one's ever said that to me before. So I decided to get solar cells and a separate battery bank, 24 kilowatt hours it is, in the garage. So my Nissan Leaf is plugged into the sun. The interesting thing is, after 10 years of owning the Leaf, the battery had to be replaced, which cost $10,000. And now the battery in the garage is flat. So that's going to cost another $10,000. So when I added it all together, my Nissan Leaf cost more money in the first place. I added it all together. Driving the Leaf per kilometer is about twice as much as a petrol Leaf. So if you want to go truly renewable for a car, you have to be wealthy.
You have to be wealthy, and that's the situation there. And one party that he missed out, that for all the environmental people that are saying, I'm doing this for the environment. Well, what about all the cobalt and all the lithium that you had to mine in questionable parts of the world because they don't have any good standards for mining and all that stuff, because we're not allowed to mine it here because our environmentalists have shut down any form of that type of exploration for minerals. So we're buying cobalt from the Congo and we're buying lithium from China. And the environment, those things are environmental disasters. Are you kidding me? Like, it's not smart. It's not smart what they're trying to push on us.
No, and then they're all hiding that under they're coming up with all sorts of excuses. But at the end of the day, I looked at a lot of the data. The fad over EV vehicles, it reached its peak. It did reach its peak. Everybody keeps mentioning places like Norway and a few places that still have good EV sales. If you look behind the scenes, they're highly subsidized and stuff like that. But Canadians woke up to the reality, as you said at the beginning of the show. They're not made out for this weather. Maybe Montreal and Toronto, but not Saskatchewan, not Alberta, not Northern Ontario. Like,
would be though? Hybrids. I think hybrids would be fine, because hybrids have small battery banks. They don't need a large battery because they're pulling their energy from an engine, an ICE engine, internal combustion engine, and that's where they get the energy from. And it generates heat. It does all the things that you would want in cold weather and in hot weather. It doesn't matter. It's a great concept. And there's one company out there that's been doing great work, and they're getting no favors from the government. They're getting no subsidies. They're getting nothing. And that's Edison Motors. These guys are revolutionizing the actual transportation vehicles in industry, as well as you could get kits to put in your pickup truck and stuff like that. But this is where it starts, right? You start in one industry and then it rolls out and it goes into the consumer market more broadly. But these guys they're doing everything from their shop in BC, and the BC government's not helping them out. They're actually making it more difficult. Their municipal government's making it more difficult for them. The federal government's making it more difficult.
Help them and couldn't help them out.
Insane. Like, if put your money where your mouth is, environmentalists. come and help a company that's actually doing good. What they're doing is they're making it so that you're getting the top efficiency of those engines, and you're putting that directly into energy that can be driven at the wheels. It just makes more sense than storing it with batteries and all this other stuff.
And the other silly thing that the Ottawa did is, there is, there's the US, there's Tesla and a few manufacturers. I guess the other place that has a lot of electric vehicle manufacturers that are pretty decent is China, but we imposed massive tariffs on that. So Guilbeault doesn't want us. When you see everything, when you put it all together, you realize what Guilbeault wants, right? He wants a grid that's collapsing. He wants you in a car that doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't want you to buy a car from China. Doesn't want you to buy a car from the US. He wants you on a horse, and he'll take away your horse at some point.
He'll take your horse away
because he wants to shove you in he wants to shove you in a 15-minute city where you're easy to control. That's people are going to say we sound like broken records, or people are going to say we sound like conspiracists. Folks, you sit around and you try and finally get all the pieces together. You go, listen, there's only one possible explanation. And what do they call that? What did Sherlock Holmes say? Like, when you've looked at all the possibilities, it's
elementary, dear Watson.
It's elementary, my dear Watson. Like, the most obvious one is usually you have to eliminate the other ones, right? So yeah. Hey, we beat this one to death, and we got 20 minutes left. So let's move on. Let's move away from.
The big story this week was Carney. Totally. Everybody's talking about Carney. What's Carney doing? And to me, it's insane. Justin Trudeau is still the Prime Minister of Canada, and he will be until such day that there is a new leader of the Liberal Party, and then that new Liberal leader will be either an MP or an unelected Prime Minister of Canada. There's precedent for this, though. There is precedent for this.
Yeah.
So it has happened before. I can't remember the guy's name.
John Turner, Kim Campbell, almost. It's happened. It's very rare.
It has happened. Now, what the big fear that a lot of people are having is, well, if Jagmeet Singh were to join forces with Carney, that would be a big scary thing, because they could actually push the election out further. This is something that they do have within their power. If Jagmeet Singh were to join forces, make a new coalition with the Liberals to stop the Conservatives, and the real concept here, and this is put together by Melanie in Saskatchewan. She says, dear Canadians, listen hard and listen well. Please, I beg you. A worrying economic storm is coming if Mark Carney and Jagmeet Singh join forces.
I can't even think of that.
We might face Mike Carney policy intentions. He's got all of these intentions, and I can leave a link in the description for people to read through this. But this is a real situation, and what would give them the justification for staying in power? Well, they could say that it would be economically irresponsible for them. It's an emergency because the Conservatives would get in and do a terrible job. Even though, and again,
did you see Jagmeet today called Poilievre a bootlicker again?
Oh boy,
second time. Like, he literally puts it in writing that Pierre Poilievre is a bootlicker. So he did say that he's hinting that Poilievre is so terrible that he might have to go back on his word. He said, you're spot on. Jagmeet is setting it up to be able to do that.
He's setting it up to be able to go back on his word. He's setting it up that if we have this would be the first unelected government that isn't like just a transitory government. So the question is, why would Mark Carney want the job? So if the job is, and hear me out, if the job is to be prime minister for a couple of months while we have an election and then lose his job, does he want to be not even the what would you call it, the opposition leader? Because he wouldn't be the opposition. He'd be in the Liberal Party, which is polling third right now. He would be behind the Bloc Québécois, and he'd be the leader of a defunct party.
Let's break it up.
What's his motivation?
I don't even know what his motivation is. I mean, I explored the topic and I posted about that this week. I mean, the only motivation I can think of at this point is it's just a feather in his cap. like he's a well-rounded individual. He's done a lot, man. I mean, you know, he was the governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England, worked for whatever, Goldman Sachs, goes to parties, got millions and millions of dollars, and now he wants to go to parties and be able to say, hey, guess what? I was also the prime minister of a country. Like, you're right. I don't know what else he has for a motivation. It is, or to get rich. But I mean, he's already getting so rich. Like, is being prime minister of Canada so lucrative that it opens up so many doors? I mean, I'd say in his case, it might actually close doors.
Well, that's what I would say. That was what I would say. So a lot of money's pouring into this, and you know, he's giving up a career of making tons and tons of money and making lucrative friends like Ghislaine Maxwell among many. But
well, so, and let me throw this out. Like, if let's say he does it for 4 years because he's thinking down the road, it opens up window or opportunities. During the 4 years where he's prime minister, he would have to take all his current assets, which I've been told are like in the 50 million range, and put him in a blind trust. Yeah, that's risky, man.
That's super risky.
Super risky. No, I don't know. I'm so, you know, when we started the show, I said that I can't figure out what's going on right now. I'm having a hard time.
Well, he's not the only one spending money in this scenario. There's other people spending money because he was a guest on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Now,
which is a weird coincidence.
A really weird coincidence. Let me just play a small clip and then we'll get into it.
Welcome, sir. I welcome you to our land, America. We are soon to be.
Well, there was a border when I came, John.
When was the last time you checked Twitter? So you've really involved yourself in. I remember you from 2008, and I mean this. Your work in helping Canada get through the economic crisis of 2008, the financial crisis that hit this country terribly, and I thought made a lot of really painful decisions for the people of this country. I thought Canada avoided the worst of that. And I believe you played a very strong role in that.
So taking that away from Stephen Harper, obviously, totally taking credit for this. And he doesn't disagree with Jon Stewart there. But the idea
Jon Stewart doesn't know who Jon Stewart doesn't know who Mark Carney is.
No idea who this guy is, but he's reading off a teleprompter saying, "Hey, look, you're the guy who single-handedly saved a whole nation from the 2008 crisis." But forgets, like, not to mention the fact that you did it by adding a ton of liquidity to the marketplace, and ended up becoming one of the big problems moving forward when Harper left office because it propped up bubbles. And we're dealing with these bubbles that the Trudeau Liberals kept inflating all through his career, and we've got 10 years of this that we can look back on now. But that's really what started and what the saving of the economy was at that time. But the main point here is who paid all the money for this relative no-name to go in on American TV and introduce this guy as at a time that Pierre Poilievre is making rounds organically in the US.
It technically can't be him because he's going to have to disclose that as part of his campaign. It could be the Liberal Party. You and I are never going to find out. Now, we know his wife works for the same company as Gerald Butts. Like, the connection that, like, in that interview, Mark Carney said, "I'm an outsider." BS, right? You're so well connected, my friend. It's uncanny. So he it's an interesting question. I don't think we'll ever have the answer, but somebody paid for him to go on that show because that show was scripted. It was like, I described it as an infomercial, or, you know, one of those late night infomercials where they're trying to sell you something. I mean, right to the point where at the end, like, I was hoping you'd play that clip closer to the end where he's like, you know, John leans over, is like, "Well, you're obviously well-spoken and well this and well that. You should be the prime minister." And then Carney, like, winks like, "Well, I'm an outsider, right?" And basically what Carney did is he announced that he's running. He hasn't done it officially, but unofficially, he went on a U.S. talk show to say that he's running for the leadership.
Yes.
It's crazy.
That's right.
Like,
so I did have the clip, but you just explained it, so
I
don't need to show it again.
Well, show it. No, show it because it's so funny. If you have that
corny,
clip, show it.
Right. Here it is. Here's the clip.
I am of the Liberal Party, yes.
Are they looking for a new leader?
I think they might be, John.
Sir, may I recommend to you, with your charm and debonair wit, yet strong financial backbone, that
it's
you
so
offer
gross.
yourself have you offered yourself as leader?
I just started thinking about it when you started. I am of the Liberal Party.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's cringe-inducing. It really is. It
Okay,
really is.
so-
It's cringe-inducing. So yeah, Carney has positioned himself, and he's looking to become the Liberal leader. But that again, this begs the question: if they don't have an intention of keeping the position, but going into an election, what would the point be? Why would he put up so much risk? Why would he do any of that? It lends. I know it sounds conspiratorial, but it lends to me to believe.
Money. Okay, so before we answer that question, let's keep going and let's bring up the viewers to a few more weird details. Okay.
Okay.
So so Carney supposedly is going to announce his run for the leadership tomorrow. And he's coming to Edmonton. So that is official. He has scheduled a news conference in Edmonton, of all freaking places, Edmonton. Now, he is officially a native of Alberta. He was born in Fort Smith, and at a young age, his family moved to Edmonton, and he went as far as high school in Edmonton. So he can say he's an Albertan. He can say that.
Yeah.
Even though he's been living out of Canada since at least 2008. Now, even if he's an Albertan, why he picked Alberta is bizarre. You know, like the Liberals, are the Liberals that desperate that they want a little bit of, you know, to try and convince Albertans? And then Edmonton, I looked, there's nothing in Edmonton. There's nothing, like there isn't a single seat in Edmonton that is leaning red. Not even close. Like they're all blue, like 99%, like literally that blue. The only red seat currently in Edmonton is Randy Boissonneau's seat.
Another native from Alberta.
Yeah, native from Alberta.
Strong Eagle man, to be precise.
Yesterday when Carney said he's coming to Edmonton to announce his leadership, I thought, okay, that's interesting. He's probably going to try and run in Boissonneau's seat. Boissonneau today announced that he's still running. He's running in the next election. He announced it today. He's like, I'm not stepping down. I'm running in the next election. I'm like, dude, you don't have a hope in hell. But
I thought he'd go back to his airplane business.
Yeah. So he announced that he's running, and he went one step further. He announced he's running, and he announced his support for Chrystia Freeland. Randy did. Chrystia Freeland hasn't announced that she's running, and neither has Mark Carney. But people are now throwing their weight behind one or the other, which is interesting. So I can't figure out why Randy's doing that. And then here's the weird twist, right? Chrystia Freeland's an Albertan, or when it's convenient for her, she claims to be an Albertan, and she's close to Mark Carney. Mark Carney is the godfather to her kids.
It's incestuous. It really is.
It's so crazy. So now I'm like, what's going on? I'm laughing and I'm asking the viewers. We can talk about it in the live portion afterward. We can talk about it for the coming days. Maybe we'll know more tomorrow, but I have no idea what's going on.
Well, there's one thing for sure. And when it comes to Mark Carney, because, you know, he's claiming to be a Canadian, proud through and through and all this stuff. Well, when he's not with us and on our soil, he's elsewhere denying the fact that he's even a Canadian. And this was one of the clips that got
Has he done that publicly?
Oh, holy cow. He didn't deny that he was Canadian, but here's a clip. Andrew Lawton shared this one. It was from the World Economic Forum. This is Davos as he's over there talking to people. Well, just listen to it.
Mark, you look like you were about to.
Yeah, it was a tell.
As a European, you know, as a
European, I am a European actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh.
Irish citizen. Yeah. So there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European, I like to say following.
Mark, you look like you were about to.
Speaking as a European, he is a European. He
has 3 passports. He has the Canadian passport, an Irish passport, and a UK passport, a British passport, a Wexit British passport, a EU Irish passport, and a Canadian passport. So his loyalty to Canada at best is 33% of the time.
Fair enough.
I cannot, Clyde. I cannot. Like, you're right. I can like. Is
I mean,
this
you know what?
bread
I've
and
hit this
circus?
topic
Is it?
before
Is it?
because people have said this about me. You're a dual citizen. You're Canadian and American. Where your loyalties lie with both. My
With both.
loyalties do lie with both countries.
By
So
definition, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And I mean, we're not in 1812 territory, my
No.
man. You know,
No, but
we're
you
friendly neighbor countries, and it's great.
You're
I
pragmatic about it. You cannot be 100% to one side. That's
No.
impossible. Not if you have two, right? So, yeah, I can't figure out what Carney's doing. Is it bread and circus? Is it because Trudeau is scheming something really terrible and we're being distracted? Your questions are valid. I don't have nobody seems to have put forward a pretty good theory at this point, because it looks like Christy Clark, the former premier of BC, dropped out.
she dropped out.
She dropped out officially today.
I
Champagne
didn't
dropped
hear
out.
that.
Melanie Jolie dropped out. They all dropped out.
Oh, they
Right
didn't
now,
work out very well for her. I mean, there was a lot of stuff being said. Incidentally, she looks like the Canadian Hillary Clinton. I didn't even notice that. And so I was making a video. I was like, oh, I gotta have a GIF of this.
So
Weird.
there's only right now. There's only one official candidate. It's that Prasad area, whatever, that guy who doesn't speak English or French from Toronto.
That was great.
So
that was
he's
really
the official candidate, and then maybe tomorrow we'll get Freeland and Carney, which is interesting because I don't think any of the three candidates that they have, they'll choose one. That's fine. And like you said, they become the de facto premier, but I don't think any of them are electable.
No. And that's why I want Freeland to be the leader. Because like my number one pick, Garrettson, was unavailable.
He's out. Yeah.
No, but
I wanted Jennifer O'Connell is who I wanted, but
oh, that's funny. I would like Freeland to win against Carney. Because I want her to go into a general election with Pierre Poilievre and have to answer for all the stuff. It would be great. I know a lot of people would be like, oh, the screeching, but personally, I wanted Trudeau to be at the debate stage with Pierre Poilievre, but that we know that's not going to happen. So next best thing would be Christopher.
Oh, and they changed the rules again. Poor Max is out again. They reached like a week ago. Max was back in the debate. He had earned the right to be at the federal debates, and then they kicked him out. So
they raised the bar. They put it to 4%, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And you know what? Personally, I think it was to make sure that Green leader Elizabeth May didn't get to go up with her bottle of pink schnapps or whatever it would be if she was up on stage. I mean, she's just obnoxious, and I think they were trying to, because there's so much attention in the US right now to Canadian politics, which I think is amazing. This is an amazing time to be a Canadian, because nobody's ever paid this much attention to Canadian politics ever. And for the world to be looking at Canadian politics, that's great. But I think that's why they didn't want Elizabeth May on
it should only be two people on stage, and I think that would never happen. But that would be funny, because if it was two people on stage, the top two contenders, it would be Poilievre and Blanchette from Quebec. Like,
well, but so they have to, I think,
and they could do a good debate. Yeah, it's going to be Jagmeet, Blanchette, Poilievre, and whoever the Liberals choose, right? Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if this is just backfiring on the Liberals or what's happening. I mean, you and I talked about this 2 weeks ago, like when they came out of the Christmas break, and this is what they announced, that he was proposing to resign. They were going to do this race. I always thought, what a gong show. Like, if this is the best you guys could come up with, man, the other options must have been super bad. Shitty. And obviously this bad option is a bad option. They're going to get they're going to have to choose from three candidates. Nobody wants to step in. Everybody's figured it out. Like, all the people, Christy Clark says, oh, my French isn't that good and I don't have time to raise the money. It's $350,000 to run. You got to pay it in installments by whatever, such and such a date, and it's non-refundable. Well, not everybody's got $350,000 kicking around, And
that's just to enter. That's not the campaigning and all.
That's
that
just to enter. So yeah, and they got until the 27th. I broke my own rule. I went and got a membership. I got a membership. I'm voting, man. I'm voting. Like I'm voting. You talk about primaries.
Yeah.
And I thought about this. Somebody, I think it was our friend Eva Chipyak brought this up. It's a good point. Some parties say that you can't vote unless if you belong to more than one party. And I go, nope, that's undemocratic. That's a bullshit way of you guys trying to. No, I'm not a liberal.
There's no
I'm
way to
allowed
enforce it.
Yeah, I'm not a liberal, but I'm gonna influence your election and pick a leader for you guys if I can. Absolutely.
Well, there's no way to enforce it, and that's just the reality of the situation.
There kind of is. I had to use 3 emails to get my membership.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, they were checking. They're weeding things
checking.
out.
Yeah.
I don't have the article up here, but apparently they've been looking to make sure that fraudulent ones are not happening. Well, there was a bunch of people. There was one guy. He even applied, or he entered as Xi Jinping and put the Chinese consulate as the address.
They ask a lot of questions when you register, right? They ask for your name, like the mandatory fields are your name, your email, your phone number, and your address. And your address is like one of those Canada Post drop downs. Like, you just choose your postal code and it fills it up. So if you want to cheat, I don't know how they could double check. I don't know how. I honestly, apart from the obvious one, if my name is Marty, but my email says King George, sure, that might be suspicious. But they send you. I think they send a text to the phone number that you put in, and you have to verify, do that kind of thing. So there's a couple of steps. Yeah.
Well, so
they ask for your birthday because you got to be more than 14, which is so bizarre. Like 14 years old.
14
cutoff. Yeah.
Well, that is the cutoff. And
the
reason why it was stated, and I'm looking to see if I have the article still. I don't still have the article, but the reason they stated, and it was Justin Trudeau that stated this in the inquiry to the Emergencies Act, or sorry, not the Emergencies, the inquiry into foreign interference, because mind you, the foreign interference that occurred in the primaries process. This is where it happened.
Yes.
It happened in selecting the MPs that would run, the candidates for MP. So this is what happened. And one of the rules that they had was that you don't even have to be a Canadian citizen. You just, or even a permanent resident. You just got to have a Canadian address. And this is what happened with the allegations being thrown at Senator Ho. Is it Ho? Senator O. Sorry, Senator O.
Yeah.
That he hired buses to go get Chinese international students to come in and elect somebody in a riding, and that's dubious, but it's not against the law. And this is what they put out there.
It wasn't against the law in the Liberal Constitution until a couple of days ago. They under a lot of pressure, they said, whatever, the emails have to be at least Canadian somehow or other.
Yeah, so Andy Lee reported on this. I saw this. The Liberal Party of Canada, under immense pressure, has changed their membership rules. And now it says you have to be at least 14 years of age. Still with the 14. Support the purposes of the party, be a Canadian citizen, or have status under the Indian Act, or be a permanent resident of Canada. Now, as a permanent resident can't vote in a general election, but you can still vote in the primaries for these political parties. And I know the Conservatives are the same way. You only have to be...
neither can a 14-year-old kid. 14 to 17 or 18, you can't vote in a general election. So
it was funny because Trudeau's justification for this, because he said this under oath too. It was so that he could get people used to the idea of voting. Younger people that haven't had a chance yet, or even people who might be citizens one day. That's what he said. And it's just freaking believable, in my opinion.
No, the only other reason I can think of for somehow or other enticing Carney is, remember when Trudeau did step down, he said, "I'm stepping down. We're going to have a leadership selection, and we're going to have a thorough wide-ranging race, right? So he kind of said we're going to choose the best from across the country because he didn't want to just appoint someone. Well, in the end, it looks like they might just appoint Freeland. Maybe Freeland's little move before Christmas when she resigned and tried to throw under the bus, maybe that won. Maybe before she did that, she went around and got the support. So now, rather than just appoint her as deputy minister, they're going to make it look for the rest of Canada, hey, look, we had a pretty good race. We had Mark Carney, some guy who doesn't speak English or French, and Chrystia Freeland. And then Freeland's going to win, which is maybe that's their ultimate goal. And they're playing this whole charade to make it look like they had a proper leadership race. So we're about to see how serious they were. But at this point, it looks like there's 3 candidates. Like to me, it's not very serious. You might as well, if that's what you wanted all along, then you should have just appointed Freeland. And, but then Freeland today, you saw her tweet, right? She's testing the water. I kind of felt like Freeland's, she did a couple of tweets where she looks like she's just testing the water to see how people respond to her. She's kind of like, I might have something to announce. I'm like, well, I'll make your life easy for you, Freeland. We don't want you. There you go.
That's what we need. Another indecisive prime minister.
Yeah. But I'm reading the comments and somebody asked, yeah, I want Freeland. I'm like you. I mean, I want Freeland to win. And then I want her to face a crushing defeat in an election. And if it's Freeland, Jagmeet wouldn't have you're onto something there. If it's Freeland, Jagmeet would not be able to say, oh, I changed my mind, I'm going to realign with Freeman. It'd be like, based on what? He does have a point, right? If it's Carney, then he could say, ooh, yeah, Carney, I'll give him a chance. Right? But
Marty, where can people find you?
Marty up north _2 on Twitter. Yeah, absolutely.